So, at the risk of my outside voice deafening everybody in the corridor as well, we'll get started. So first up, thanks very much for coming. Nice turnout. And we're going to be talking about surviving in a rough neighborhood. And you might think, well, this is Vancouver, man. This is not a rough neighborhood. What are you talking about? But, you know, when you start thinking about little things like windstorms and earthquakes, those are the first couple of things that come to mind. We had a little bump. Who felt the bump the other day? You know, a little bump. Yeah, we had a little bump the other day, a little reminder. We had a little windstorm back in August. It was a bit early, and it kind of, you know, a lot of power went out for a long time in some areas, and we might talk a little bit more about that in detail when we get into the kind of responses you can expect from various organizations. And then, of course, we are connected to the rest of the planet, right? Both in terms of doing business, whatever your business is, and in terms of cyber connectivity. So we all live in the same rough neighborhood. We live, at least in the digital world, in the roughest neighborhood in the world, because we have to be able to cope with what the worst, you know, the worst that the roughest cyber neighborhood can throw at us, because we're connected to it, right? Geography does not insulate you from anything like that. So that's why we should think about living in a rough neighborhood and thinking about the things that we might want to do to try and protect ourselves from, you know, from things going badly wrong in such a way as we don't want it to. So with that opening preamble ramble, we'll just get started. So my name's Clive Lunn, in case you hadn't figured it out yet. I'm a fellow of the Business Continuity Institute. We'll talk about that in a second. And I'm also a certified Canadian risk manager. So I spent 20-odd years in business continuity management. I've had many years, 5-6 years in enterprise risk management. So I like to think, at least, that I've got some idea of, you know, how the stuff all fits together. So I hope I'll be able to convey that to you in a meaningful way. The other thing that I'm the leader of something called the BCI Forum. So the BCI is the Business Continuity Institute. And we have a forum here in Vancouver. We meet roughly quarterly, sometimes a little more frequently than that. And what it is, it's supposed to be aimed at BCI certified business continuity practitioners, where we get together, swap ideas, get speakers in, learn, help each other, leverage knowledge, and that type of thing. But we adopt a very liberal sort of view of membership. So if you're involved in business continuity management and you want to learn more about it, you can join the forum. It costs nothing, right? It's like ISACA. It doesn't cost you anything to go to the meetings. We do lean on you gently to try and join the BCI, and there are benefits to that, but that just comes with the territory. If you want the muffins, you've got to listen to the sales pitch, okay? It's just the way, the BCI pays for the muffins, you don't. So that's kind of the way it works. Quickly, what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be looking at what is the BCI, just very, very quickly. We'll be looking at what is business continuity management. We'll also be talking about the use of the word business, because that seems, I don't know why, but it seems to confuse people. You know, I should maybe hand out dictionaries, but it does seem to confuse people. We'll talk about why you should do this, so a little bit of a chat around that. We'll talk about how you do it. What is the process? Because there is, like most things, there's a way of doing this, right? There's leading practice, there's actually international standards, there's local standards, and so on. So there's a way to do it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Who should be involved? That's very, very important, and that's why I asked earlier, you know, who's in IT, who's in something like risk management, who's a senior or executive manager, and so on. And then we'll go into a little bit of detail about how to do it. We'll just touch on very briefly some of the outputs that result from the program, and then we've got Q&A at the end, and I'll try and get through this, you know, in such a way that we have a decent amount of time at the end for Q&A. I don't want to just be a talking head and sort of stand here and blast at you guys. That's not really going to help it. But obviously what we're trying to get away from is Dilbert here, right? That's what we don't want to have. We don't want, you know, something's gone wrong and we're going, help, help, what do we do now? We don't know, we haven't thought about it, because frankly that doesn't work. And we'll touch on why in a second. So very quickly, the BCI. Anybody here certified Business Continuity Institute member? Hand up, please, Ed. Thank you. Right, that makes 2 of us in the room, right? Anybody certified by the DRI, Disaster Recovery Institute? Oh, imposter. You're a turncoat, Ed. Yeah, a couple of people. Good. Okay, there are 2 organizations that certify practitioners worldwide. There's the Disaster Recovery Institute International and the Business Continuity Institute. I'm here to talk to you as a representative of the BCI, so I'm going to tell you about the BCI. Right? BCI, headquartered in the UK, over 8,000 members in over 100 countries. We've got all these chapters. We have a Canadian chapter, there's a US chapter, we have the local forums, which are a subset of the chapter, and so on. The important thing here, I think, is the wealth of knowledge that you are able to tap into as a member of the BCI if you join the organization. And something that I think we're all very proud of is we have something called the Good Practice Guidelines that we publish. It's the how-to, okay? I like to think of it as it's a bit like the generally accepted accounting principles for accountants, except this is for business continuity management, or maybe it's like, like the PMBOK, I guess, for project managers, right? It gives you all the sort of process, the things you should do and think about to get this right. The Good Practice Guidelines were effectively the first draft of something called British Standard 25999, which was the business continuity standard. That led directly to ISO 22301. Right? The first draft of ISO 22301, which is the international standard for business continuity management, was the Good Practice Guidelines. That was basically the first draft. And then obviously it was modified from there because there was additional input. And once the 22301 was published, the BCI updated the Good Practice Guidelines so they fit together. So if you understand the Good Practice Guidelines and you follow them, you should get yourself to a position where you'll be very close to compliance, or if not in compliance, with 22301. If you wanted to go down that route. There are various levels of certification. I'm fortunate enough to be a fellow of the Institute. Of the 8,000 members, there's only 130 fellows worldwide. We have 8 fellows here in Canada. A member of the BCI, MBCI, is a certified practitioner, fellow certified practitioner. So is an associate member. It's different levels of experience, basically. The fellow is a bit weird. There's no sort of direct route to it. You've got to do something kind of special or quirky or different or whatever to be awarded fellowship, which I'm fortunate enough to have. The other thing with the BCI, of course, is we're truly an international organization. The Good Practice Guidelines, and I had to write it down here, is actually available obviously in English, in Arabic, in French, in German, Italian, Korean, Spanish, and it's soon to be available in Chinese and Japanese script as well. Right? So when we talk about the Business Continuity Institute being an international organization, we really mean it. Right? The stuff is available worldwide. There are chapters worldwide that are very, 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 very active. So let's talk a little bit about business continuity management. And the first thing I want to talk about is business. Right? Everyone's in business, even if you are a government organization. Right? What you do is your business. Have you ever heard that English expression, mind your own business? It doesn't mean mind your own private sector profit-making organization, right? It means, what I'm doing is my business. It's what I do, right? It's my thing. If you think of, let's think of healthcare. In Canada, healthcare is not a for-profit thing, right? Industry, but they are in the business of looking after people and curing them and what have you, right? That's healthcare, right? That's their business. That's what they do. Occasionally, I've seen people try to rename the discipline into something like continuity of operations and things like that, because I think it's the easy way to do it, because someone's going to say, well, we're not in business, we're not a private sector organization, or we're a mutually owned organization. Well, guess what? You're still in business. Right? The problem, if you try and rename it, is that the wealth of literature that is available to you, if you call it business continuity, suddenly is not available to you. So all those white papers, all the books, all the documents, the leading practices, all the stuff that you can leverage if you are the person responsible for the business continuity program in your organization, you suddenly can't use it because you've just told someone that this is continuity of operations. And now you're going to say, here, read this white paper from whatever organization. It talks about business continuity. So, well, this isn't us. We're doing continuity of operations. We're not in business. So I strongly urge you to try and use the word the way it's intended. Right, and not to rename the thing, because you really, unless you're going to retype or all those white papers yourself and change all the documentation and plagiarize it in the process, you're not going to be able to leverage that information that's out there. So really, really important. The other thing that we often get muddled up with is business continuity management and emergency management. Right, so within business continuity management, we talk about incident management as the thing that controls the management and the control of the thing that's gone wrong. Right? Emergency management, in Clive speak, is saving lives, reducing suffering. Right? It's all about, the building's burnt down, we've got hundreds of people in the street, we've got to get them into shelter, or we've had an earthquake and we've got to give these people food and water, and we've got to set up hospitals, and well, that's emergency management. Right? The two can fit together. And in fact, any organization that is responsible for emergency management that does not have a business continuity plan is kidding itself. Right? And the reason I say that is if the incident, there's that word again, affects you as the organization trying to execute your emergency response plan or your emergency management plan, and the assets or the resources that you need to execute that plan have been affected by the incident, you could be hooped. And that's where business continuity comes in. Right? So we often get this question, is business continuity a subset of emergency management, or is emergency management a subset of business continuity? And the answer is, it depends. If you're police, fire, ambulance, emergency management BC, if you have, municipalities are a bit different, but if you're an emergency management organization, that's what you do, that is your business, then business continuity is a subset of emergency management because that's your business. However, if you're any other sort of organization with an emergency management role, perhaps, then that is got to be covered off. It's part of your business continuity program, because what you'll find, and we see this when we start talking about critical infrastructure and so on, we'll talk about it in a minute. If you get the phone call, hi, we need your trucks, your helicopters, your tugs, your barges, your whatever it happens to be, right, to help us out in this earthquake we've just had, if you don't have a business continuity plan or program, you're not going to be able to get back in business and help the province or the local authority, whoever's asking for that help, right? So for us, as business continuity practitioners, we see incident management as a component of a business continuity program. It's one set of controls that you put in place, right? It's one piece of it. So you always get that argument, and I just think it depends on what business you're actually in. So let's just talk about why. Why do we want to do this? Well, first rule in any business, particularly if you're a private sector business, even if you're not a profit maker, you could be a non-profit. You could be a mutually owned organization. First rule of business is staying in business, I always say, right? So here's a little thing from Disaster Safety, which is the Insurance Institute of Business and Home Safety. 25% of all businesses that have do not reopen following a major incident. 1 in 4. Yeah? Your building just burned down, your factory burned down, or whatever happened to be. 25% of those organizations will not reopen. That's it, they're gone, they're done, they're finished. Right? That's the end of it. Right? Anecdotally, and no one's ever managed to really get the stats on this, it could be as high as 80% of businesses or organizations that do not have a business continuity plan, that have a major incident, will go out of business within 5 years. Right? It's like the long, slow death. You have this problem, you fix it, you throw money at it, but you haven't been able to service your customers, whatever shape or form your customers take. They go away, your business winds down, you've still got the debts and you've got the operating expenses and so on. And over time, you just wind down, eventually that's it. And anecdotally, that seems to be the result of not being prepared. Because most of the things that we talk about are actually foreseeable, right? Very, very few of the things that we talk about are not foreseeable. And very few of these things, cannot be planned for. Sometimes it may take a major, some strategy changes to your business. But we'll talk about that in a second as well. So, important thing about this, why do we do it? We want to protect all the stakeholders. Right? Stakeholders, usually first and foremost, if it's private sector, people think about the investors. Absolutely, you've got to think about the investors. If you're an executive in an organization, you have a fiduciary duty to look after the investors' money. Right? That's one of the reasons why you're there. You've got to do it. You've got to look after their investment. But you've also got, say you're a credit union, you've got members. Right? Members are also the owners, but also the customers. Right? So if you're a credit union and you have a meltdown of some sort and you can't transact, then you're letting the members down. They're stakeholders, they're also the owners, right? Can you imagine what would happen if your banking organization just suddenly stopped working for an extended period of time? There's all those payments that didn't go through, there's the mortgage that didn't get paid, there's the car didn't get paid, the credit, your credit score just went out the window, and so it goes on. And I always think of financial institutions as a bit like monopolies. Although there's lots of competition in the market, you try changing your financial institution in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a disaster. Good luck with that. It's bad enough when you try to swap from one organization to another and disentangling yourself. It's really difficult. So doing it in the middle of a crisis, probably a bit different if you are, Costco, versus Walmart versus, if you have a problem, lots of other people, there's places other people can go. Having said that, Walmart has one of the most effective business continuity programs in the world. Right? When Hurricane Katrina hit in New Orleans, they lost, it was 40, I forget the exact numbers, I was like 40 odd stores were shut down. About 4 or 8 or something like that were actually destroyed and couldn't reopen. But within 24 hours of them being granted access into the devastated areas, all the stores were back, they were up and running, supplied with generators, restocked, not with all the frivolous kind of seasonal stuff, but stuff people needed. Right? Walmart became the go-to place for everything, and plus all their employees still had their jobs. Right? Employees of other organizations, they lost their jobs because they didn't come back. They're the 25% didn't open. Right? So, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. The next slide, we talk about critical infrastructure. A couple other thoughts here. So normally if you're doing risk management, you tend to look at what happens to me, the organization, if something goes wrong. A bad thing happens. A risk materializes, whatever the risk is, right? I believe that if you are some sort of monopoly, either you're a government organization, an effective or structural monopoly because there's nowhere else that people can go, I think you really have an obligation to look at the societal impacts of an event, right? Whatever the event is, right? When you start thinking about all the criteria that you use for assessing risk and assessing the consequences of something bad happening, one of the sets of criteria is what happens to the people we serve, right? This is not, okay, my hardware store shuts, but my customers will go somewhere else. It only affects me. I'm the hardware store. That's a problem for me. But it's not a problem for the person, who wants a wrench or whatever. They just go down the road, and that's my problem. But if you're a monopoly, effective de facto monopoly, you've got to think about people can't go somewhere else. So you're going to have a negative impact on the community as a whole. And this is something I like to quote. It's a safety saying, but if you think safety is expensive, try having an accident. Right? The same thing happens. Look at what are the railroad guys who lost their train in Lac Mégantic, killed all those people. Well, the next thing they did, of course, as soon as they realized that what they were liable for is they wound up, they declared bankruptcy. They just folded. Boom, they're gone. And all the people who worked there who weren't at fault, the people who weren't at fault, they lost their jobs. Okay? So, you look at that, that's one accident, a big one, gone, end of organization. Okay? One problem. Something that was really, if you look at it, was something that should have been easy to mitigate. That was just absolute, that was negligence. There's no doubt about that in my mind. One of the other things that I always like to talk about this is again a distinction to some extent between business continuity management and emergency management, is with business continuity management, the word is continuity, right? It's not dang it broke, but we fixed it. That's emergency management, right? Oh, dang, the dike just went and we flooded, the care home, but we saved the people and we got them into shelter and we fed their dogs and cats and everything else. We fixed it, right? That's not business continuity management. Business continuity management is we don't want the dike to go, right? If we do it, if we could, it's like risk management. If you could, and you could do your job perfectly, people would look at you and say, well, what are you doing here? Nothing ever goes wrong, right? That's the goal, right? That's the goal. It's the old question around policing. Oh, crime rate's so low. Why do we need all these police officers? Maybe that's why the crime rate's so low. Okay, you take the police officers away and the crime rate goes on. You say, oh, we need more police officers. So you get into this sort of. So you got to kind of understand the goal here is not is to keep things moving, right? Is to try and prevent things from going wrong, which is where you can, which is kind of like it's risk management. It's not emergency management. Okay. Something very important here is cost, saving money, right? Insurance. Insurance is an interesting one because insurance is financial compensation for loss. It does not fix the problem really. Right? Your house burns down, you can buy all new contents. But all those family heirlooms, they're gone. You're never going to replace them, okay? Same with life insurance. Life insurance doesn't replace the life. It just gives you financial compensation for loss. Right? Insurance is not, you can't buy customers. When you're in marketing here may disagree with me, but you can't buy customers, right? Not in a hurry. Now let's look at, again, why? So critical infrastructure. These are the critical infrastructure sectors that we define in Canada. They're pretty much the same worldwide, right? So energy, utilities, finance, food, government stuff, health care, right? ICT, obviously, manufacturing for certain things, safety, transportation, water. In the event of let's think of an earthquake in BC. If we have an earthquake in BC, everything with a tick next to it is needed sooner rather than later, okay? Double tick means it's needed pretty quickly, okay? Anybody involved in those organizations, if you don't have enough people in that sector with a business continuity plan, the sector's not going to be able to give you what you need, right? Let's just think about, when we had the windstorm in August, I was driving back home and I drove past Home Depot. Lights on, generators running, working. You can go in a Home Depot, buy a thing and come out. I then went past Costco. This is up sort of Maple Ridge heading back into town this way. Shut. I live in Coquitlam. All the major stores around me were shut. They were all shut. They lost the contents of their freezers and everything, which is fine because they were probably insured, but no one could buy anything. You couldn't go in there and buy food, right? And for a few days afterwards, it was a real mess and what have you. So Home Depot was good to go. The others were not. Now, all we needed on top of that was if the banking organizations were able to give people money in some shape or form, right, which they should be able to do, and I've worked in banking for a long time, so I have quite a few ideas of what you can do there. That means that I have a problem at home. You know, the tree landed on my house, so I now need a tarp to put on the hole. So I can go and get some money, and then I can go to the store, which is operating, is open, and then I can put a tarp on now I can live in my house, right? So I don't need to go down to the great soup kitchen run by Emergency Management BC because I can stay in my house, okay? The converse of this, if all these things fail, and people can't get money, go to the store, buy stuff that's been replenished because the transportation, right? Our transportation systems are up and running. Trucks are moving, all that logistics stuff. They've got their business continuity plans. It's all working, right? The store that ran out of stuff ordered more stuff, and it came in. It was restocked. If we can't do that, then Emergency Management BC is going to be feeding about 4 million people after a few days when they all run out of food and stuff to eat. Okay? That's why this stuff needs business continuity plans. They don't all need emergency management plans or emergency response plans. They need business continuity plans. They need to get back in business so they can provide the services or the goods to their customers that they normally provide. Right? Does it kind of make sense? Right? This is the stuff that makes society and our communities function, right? It's the bedrock that we're all built on. Have you ever seen the new Maslow's hierarchy of needs? The bottom layer is now Wi-Fi, okay? It's no longer oxygen and, it's Wi-Fi. You don't have Wi-Fi, you're done. Bottom layer, right? Right, quick loop through this. This is the BCM, the Business Continuity Management Lifecycle, as espoused by the Business Continuity Institute. Starting at the top, that's where you do things called business impact analyses, risk assessments. Talk about those in a second. This is what we call understanding the business. This is the analysis, right? What is important? What is urgent? You really need to know. How are things interconnected? If that thing fails in my organization, what else fails downstream? How long can we tolerate that? You need to know that. The big difference between a business impact analysis and a risk assessment is impact analysis, you need to know consequence as a function of time. Right? Anybody here from internal audit? Okay. Good news, you guys are really, really important. Bad news is you're probably the least urgent function in your organization. Maybe unless you've got to be COSO compliant and things will be signed off and what have you. Right? But you've got to know the difference between important and urgent. If you have a call center that takes orders and that's where all your business is done, If that thing's down, you're going to feel the impact within hours. You're probably going to hit an unacceptable threshold. If internal audit doesn't show up for a month, no offense, internal audit, everyone has a party, okay? And sure, you know, it's a problem because they're all going to overspend a credit card, but the point is, you're not going to stop production, you're not going to put the place out of business. If you guys are missing for too long, yeah, the place could implode because, you know, things are not done right, standards are not maintained, maybe fraud is occurring, and all those sort of things. But you've got to understand this is important and urgent. What is urgent? Is it a day, 2 days? Is it a week? Is it hours? Is it a month? Right? And then you need to backtrack that to the resources or assets needed to sustain those activities. So the way I look at it, impact analysis gives you the consequence part of your scale because you're looking at process, right? How bad, how quickly. And then we look at what assets or resources needed to sustain those activities. Now you've got assets. Now you can start saying what hazards are those assets vulnerable to? And you can get some sense, and Jordan's going to smile in a minute, you get some sense of how likely that is to happen, and then by looking at that you can look at how likely things are to go wrong and what the consequence might be. Then you can look at failure modes and all that. If you have the time, we'll cover that in a second as well. So this is really the bedrock of it. This is where it starts, is understanding what's important, how quickly the impact materializes and becomes unacceptable to the organization. Then you do some risk-cost trade-offs, you know, you accept, mitigate risks, you design controls, it's this good old risk management. Then you implement them, what I call asset protection. This is the making sure it doesn't go wrong, okay? This is the prevention is better than cure side of things. Incident response plans, business continuity plans, IT disaster recovery plans, you create all those. Big thing here is the distinction between what we call plans and arrangements. A plan is something on a piece of paper, it's a plan, it's something we're going to do, right? Instructions we're going to follow, guidelines, whatever. Arrangements are the things you put in place, it's the things you're going to use in the execution of the plan, right? If you've ever been on a cruise ship, there's always a plan to abandon ship. But there are arrangements that are called lifeboats and life rafts, right? You can have a plan to abandon a crashing airliner, but if you don't have a parachute, you're probably hooped, right? That's the arrangement. The same as if you've got a plan to, say, recover your IT or get your call center up and running or restore that manufacturing process. If you don't have the things that are needed to do that available in the time that they're needed, it's not going to work, right? You can't rely on it. So there may be some things that are off the shelf, readily available, no complications, you know, that you can buy at the time of the incident, and you know you can acquire them quickly enough to give them to the people who need them to continue the job. That's fine. And that maybe you have an arrangement with a manufacturer who can give you stuff, or you know which stores to go to get the stuff or whatever. But there are some things that you might have to replace quicker than what they can be acquired. Or there are technical issues. IT is the classic case with this, right? I'm working with a client at the moment that still has a system, they're still running a system on NT. They're moving. But the point is, if that thing goes up in smoke or implodes or goes poof or whatever, right, try and recover that system, right? Try and recover that. That thing's nearly unrecoverable. Right? They're going to have to go out and find an antique server. Hopefully they can get the drivers. You know, half your IT people ain't going to work, right? But the rule of thumb, I used to do this at IBM many years ago. Back then we used to say you had a 1 in 4 chance of a bare metal recovery first time. So there's my old system, here's my new system. First time ever I'm going to try and recover it. Let's go. 1 in 4 chance of getting it right. Right? 3 out of 4 times it used to kind of go wrong somehow. It doesn't mean you couldn't eventually recover it, it just means it didn't work the way you expected it to and you didn't get it back the way and in time. Right? That was the stats that we had back then. So really important. Governance, absolutely vital. The most difficult part of all this stuff is not doing the various pieces. That's comparatively easy if you have the knowledge and you can study and learn and all that. It's getting it done. It's being able to go to a VP and say, we've got to refresh that impact analysis. We've got to put these controls in place. You know, we've got to do an exercise to make sure this stuff works. Oh, I haven't got the time for that now. Right? The tone at the top. If your executive is not involved, you're going to have a real problem getting this stuff to work. One of the reasons for that is as a practitioner, as a risk manager, as a middle-level executive or manager, you likely don't have the authority to commit the organization to the things it needs to do to make sure that it's resilient. Right? You need executive input to do that. And if you don't get their involvement and they don't agree as to what you're going to do, you can put all the plans in place you like. When something goes wrong, the executives will feel the urge to lead. Right? So you'll have all these plans that you've rehearsed with the whole business, everybody from the C-suite and down are all good with it. Then the C-suite step up and they go, oh, no, hang on. We're going to do it like this. You go, we can't do it like that. If we do it like that, this will go wrong. No, I'm in charge here. I am going to lead because that's what I do. I manage crises every day. That's my job description, right? And all the best laid plans of my cement, they're gone, right? You thought you could, bring that business unit back up first and that one second and take the assets that they needed and give it to them and all. You got it all worked out and someone who has the authority steps up and says, no, we're doing it like this. And the whole thing collapses in a heap. Okay, so if you don't have governance, you don't have executive leadership, you're going to battle. You might have a parachute, but it may not open, okay, when you want it to. Drills, exercises, tests, obviously that's part of it, awareness and training and culture and all that. People. It doesn't help if you have all these plans and arrangements, things no one knows about them. Right? I mean, it's really that simple. And this extends, of course, awareness and training into, okay, what do you do after you've dropped, covered, and held on? We think about what the province is telling us correctly. Drop, cover, hold on with the earthquake. Hope you all know that. I hope you all practice shakeout. What happens after shakeout? What happens after you crawl out from under your desk? What happens next? It's called business continuity management, guys. And the thing that really, really gets me is whenever you hear the province talking about this stuff, that's where they stop. Right? You've now got, you crawl out from under your desk, you got your bottled water for 72 hours, not long enough, by the way, and you've got your food and all the other good stuff, and that's it. That's where all the guidance stops. It is not enough, right? There is life after an earthquake. There should be, right? Just like evacuation drills. How many of you practice evacuation drills in your places of work? Please say yes. Yes. Okay. What happens next? You all wander back into the building. Now, what happened if there was no building? Okay. There's life after evacuation. Okay. So you're all standing in the parking lot, and there are actually flames pouring out of every window. Now, what do? Right. Yeah. Go. Good, and sometimes that's the right thing to do. What happens then? How do you communicate with your people? How do you tell them what to do? Do they know where to go, where to meet? Who's urgent, who's not urgent? Are they going to start trying to phone up and say, hey, am I still being paid? Because what do your HR policies look like? Huh? This is business continuity management, folks. This is what it's about. Okay? What happens after evacuation? What happens after the IT system crashes? Who do you call at 2 in the morning?
So, which BCP testing techniques have you found to be most useful and what kind of challenges?
It depends what you're doing. So, and where you are in the maturity of the program, right? Usually the first thing, let's say you've just developed a whole bunch of plans, you've usually worked with a select set of people in an organization, representatives from every part of the business and so on. By the way, management and workforce. You've got to have someone who swings the pick and the hammer, and you've got to have a manager as well, because sometimes the two don't know what each other are doing, and I really mean that. You've got to get both views, right? So you develop all these plans, you've got to do at least some sort of walkthrough or a guided tabletop just to get everybody used to it. Okay, so they're accustomed to it, they know there's a plan and so on. And then you can go up from there. I mean, you can start getting into, simulations. You can get into functional exercises where you're actually really working, in the alternate way and seeing if you can, do the job from the alternate location, using alternate processes, using the alternate assets. But that's usually a long way down the track, okay? And of course, if you talk about technology, or you talk about exercises and we talk about tests, right? You test technology. You test notification systems. They either work or they don't work. It's a bit binary. It's like IT, right? It's on, it's off. You exercise people. You can't fail an exercise. All right? When you do exercises, what you're always looking for is gaps. I always say to my clients, I do exercises all the time. And I had one client, I had him sweating, literally, in the last exercise. He loved it, though. Invited me back to do another one, so it's good, But the goal of an exercise is to find the gaps. My dad used to say to me when I was a kid, he said, there's only two places to do car maintenance. You do it in the shop, or you do it at the side of the street in the rain, right? If you do your exercises and you find your gaps, that's doing your car maintenance in the shop, right? If you don't do that, you're going to do your car maintenance in the rain, the side of the road, and it breaks down, right? That's when you're standing in the parking lot and the flames are coming out the window and no one knows what to do. Okay? So just very briefly here, we'll move this on a little bit. Two sets of people. I often see this. People create all these plans. It doesn't matter, it's emergency management plans, business continuity plans, whatever. And the responders know what to do. Right? Oh, we've got a plan, and if something goes wrong, I do this. What about the people who prepare, the people who maintain the program? Right? Look at the different types of people involved in keeping this thing alive, the care and feeding of the program. We're back to governance again. Yeah? Who decides policy? Who reviews it? Who decides what the goals are of this program? Who decides what's an acceptable risk to the organization? Who decides what to accept, what to mitigate? That's the executive that do that. Right? That is the executive. That is not the risk manager, unfortunately. Right? Risk analyses, someone's got to lead it. The risk owners, you should have risk owners in the organization, people responsible for their own parts of the organization. Who approves the controls, the things that we're going to put in place? We're going to buy that new IT system. We're going to build a whole new head office down the road and mothball it just in case. That's the executive, right? Client said to me the other day, what do I need to do to survive the earthquake? What do you need to do to survive the earthquake in Vancouver if you're a business, an organization? I'll tell you what, you need two things. You need a business continuity program so that you can continue, with all its warts and all its things, so that you can continue to provide your clients with the goods and services they expect, whatever those are. And the second thing you need is enough customers outside of the at-risk area to sustain your business. That could be a strategy change for the organization. Holy cow, you mean we've got to open an operation in Alberta and Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Ontario, and we've got to be licensed in those provinces? Because if we don't do that, we're probably not going to survive the earthquake, because although we may, our clients might not. We don't know what state of preparedness they have. If all our clients go away, we're dead. We're done. We're out of business. Okay? But if you've got enough customers that may not be impacted by that particular hazard, that's the big one for us here, is the earthquake, right? That is not a decision made by the risk manager or the business continuity manager. They're not going to say, okay, we're going to hire 20 new salespeople, we're going to put them out in Ontario, and we're going to open an office, we're going to train them. And you don't have the authority to do that. That is a business strategy decision. That sits here. Okay? Implementing controls, risk owners, asset owners, how do we fix it, how do we repair? Well, that's the people who own the stuff, who use the stuff, manage the stuff on a day-to-day basis. Program leads, you've got to have a program lead. You've got to have someone's got to do all this stuff, make sure it's all being done. Okay? So the governance thing is important. Very briefly, touch points. These are all the things, and this is not all the things, these are most of the things that have an impact on a resilient organization or an organization's resilience. Business strategy, we just mentioned that. Okay? How are we going to stay in business? What kind of things are we going to mitigate? Enterprise risk, this fits in. Your business continuity risk may be this big. You may have other risks that threaten to shut the business down immediately. You don't want to be spending money over here when it should be being spent over there, right? So you need to see this holistically. Interesting thing with business continuity management, if you've got a proper business continuity management program set up, and you take out the words business continuity management, and you insert the words enterprise risk management, they look almost identical. Because unlike most other risk disciplines, business continuity management, it's enterprise-wide. Right? It is enterprise-wide. It's one risk type, which is an interruption. The consequences are many. They impact finance, reputation, possibly safety, compliance, a whole whack of things, right? But there's one sort of set of risk events that you're dealing with. Unlike enterprise risk management, we're dealing with many risk events. But other than that, it looks exactly the same. The governance process is the same. Right? And I've worked in both, and trust me, they're the same. Emergency or incident management, direct impact on this. What happens after we evacuate the building? Okay, what do we do now? Crisis management, crisis communications. Something's gone wrong. Why? What's happened? Are we going to fix it? How quick is it going to be up? Who are our critical customers? Who are our critical stakeholders? What operations are coming back on stream first? What can we tell people? Okay, it all ties in. Information cybersecurity. Obviously, cyber events can trigger business continuity incidents. Okay, in fact, IT is the single biggest cause of business interruptions. Why? Because it is probably the most complex thing, and it's usually a single point of failure for the whole organization. Right? Not only that, You think of all the hazards that IT systems are exposed to, right? From digitally, think of it electronically, right? Then add to that, they live in buildings that are then exposed to all the hazards the buildings are exposed to, plus all the human stuff and everything else. So they're hugely at risk if they're unprotected, right? And the consequences are usually very widespread. So IT is big in business continuity. Okay, physical security as well, in terms of people getting into buildings, stealing stuff, what have you. Operational risk management, how you do things. You make a blunder. Oh, we didn't set the brakes on the train. We killed all those people, and now look what's happened. Right now we're out of business, and so on. Okay, facilities management. Now, I was in a guy's office a while ago. I didn't get the job, actually. He was the risk manager for this organization. Talking to me, he says, well, what do you think, what leading indicators? I said, well, there's some things you can look at and some things you can't. And I said, for example, fire, right? How likely is this building to burn down? I went, you don't have a sprinkler head in your office, but you've got sprinkler heads in the rest of the building. So I guess someone built this wall without doing a proper job, and you could have a fire in here. Do you have like one of those dollar store power bars under your desk, maybe with a personal heater that you didn't know about? How many times that occurred? So that's a reason why likelihood is really, really near impossible to determine. Anyway, so maybe he thought I was a bit of a clever clot, and he didn't ask me to come back and do anything else, but that's fine. I don't mind it. I speak to lots of people. Facilities management is very, very important for both prevention and cure, right? Supply chain management, right? This is really, really important. Your suppliers can shut you down. If they fail, you can fail. Depends what they give you. Right? So this, when you start assessing new suppliers, and you start thinking about, well, okay, so do they produce quality products? They're going to deliver it on time. Like you think, well, that's good, yeah. And then you got the old, force majeure clause in it. My cat has kittens. I'm shutting down for a week. Force majeure. Okay, no. Your cat having kittens is a reasonably foreseeable event. Unacceptable. One of the questions you should be asking your suppliers, if they are, so when you do your assessment, how critical is that supplier? Can you just run down the road and buy something? Is it a big deal? Or do they make something for you? Are they the only people who can do it? Are they your outsourcer or something like that, right? Do they have a business continuity program? Right? That's often it's a tricky one. If you're a big customer, you can usually lean on them. Right? If you're a little customer, there's a bit more difficult. But at least what you can do is ask them for some sort of verification as to what they have. And then you can make a decision. Am I going to sole source this, or am I not going to sole source this? Right? These are the decisions that need to be made to make you a resilient organization. And obviously safety in the environment. Because if you have a safety incident, WorkSafe come in, or the safety authority, and they shut you down. The police come in. Stop. Fire guy rolls up. Don't, do not occupy. Everybody out. Right? You have a business interruption. Quick one on the impact analysis, right? Time, consequence. This is what you got to know. This is the whole point of the impact analysis. What do you do? What happens if you can't do it? And what do you need to sustain the activities? That third one's something I roll in. It's technically a critical resource analysis, but I figure if you're talking to people, do it once, not 20 times. If this activity fails, day one, we have an impact sitting about here. By about day 3, we're up here. Let's just say the organization says, well, our threshold for tolerance is about here. Well, clearly, the red activity is going to break that threshold by the end of day 1, but it's going to take, nearly a week before the blue activity will. That's a guideline for your recovery time objectives. How quickly. That's how you can prioritize what you need to fix first, both in terms of the assets needed to sustain the activities and the people and what they should be doing. Okay? Gets to how much space you need, what equipment you need, what they do in the meantime, and so on. Very, very important. A lot of people say to me, oh, this impact analysis thing doesn't work. I ask people, well, how quickly you want to come up, and they all want to be up immediately, and they set unreasonable expectations. That's because you ask them. You never ask them. You never ask a manager how quickly they want to recover. Right? You don't do that because they go, oh, God, immediately. No, now, I can't miss my targets. You derive it. That's why it's called business impact analysis, not assessment. Okay? What you do is you figure out the consequence as a function of time. And then you go away and you look at all those consequences and you go upstairs and you say, this is how bad it gets, how quickly, where do you want to draw the line? Right? You derive the recovery time objectives. You don't ask for them. If you ask for them, they'll always be wrong. You've got to be able to compare things on some sort of equitable basis, which is where your link to enterprise risk comes in, because they don't have risk criteria. If you don't have an enterprise risk program, the first thing you have to do is define your risk metrics. Right? Step one of the program. Okay? So really, really important. And again, what you can do from here, then you can go, what do you do? What are the consequences? And what do you need? And that gives you the targets for recovering stuff and people and activities. Okay? We'll talk very briefly. Bow tie analysis for those who are familiar with it. So here's what people try to do. They say, oh, okay, we do the risk assessment and the impact analysis, and the impact tells us how bad things are going to be, and the risk assessment, when I look at the assets, is going to tell me how likely they are to fail. We say, oh, that's great. Okay, so if you're building, Jordan's going to jump in here. If you're building 747s or Airbuses, you've probably got a fairly good idea of the likelihood of a component failing in a certain period of time, because everything is controlled. The materials that were made at the foundry are controlled. They know the batch, the heat number they call it. They know the person who made the component was a certified person, right? And the component was tracked. They know what aircraft it went in. They know what the flight time. They know everything about it from start to finish. They know where every single component made from the same material went, which aircraft. So if it fails, something goes wrong with it ahead of time, they can look back and say it's there as well. So all you got. That's why air travel is so safe. Commercial air travel is so safe. Everything is controlled. This building, no disrespect to TELUS, this building here, you have no idea where the pipe came from. The 4-inch riser pipe that is being used for the sprinkler system, you have no idea where it came from, the competency of the person who fit the damn thing, and whether they did a proper job. Right? I worked for an organization a while ago that had a 4-inch riser pipe burst in a parking lot that was next to their data center. Data centers, don't put them underground. That was the old days when floors couldn't support the weight of the kit, right? And it nearly flooded the data center. And the reason why was simple. They had, where the pipe went through the slab, normally what you do is you put stopping around the top to stop water from getting in and just running down. It's a parking lot, right? What someone had done is put stopping around the top and stopping around the bottom and created a void, which over time filled with water or moisture, and it corroded the pipe because the moisture couldn't escape, right? That's just one example of something you would never, ever find unless you were looking for that thing. There are so many things that can go wrong in a building that could cause the power to go out, that could cause a flood or a fire or some other thing. Trying to predict the likelihood that your building is going to burn down is a waste of time. The insurance industry has stats, which are good for them. Oh, 1 in 10,000 buildings are going to burn down. That's great. We have a portfolio of 10,000 buildings. Every year we're going to have to fork out for one. Great. The actuaries can have a lot of fun with that. But you live in a building. It's either your building or it's not your building. Okay? The likelihood argument doesn't apply if the consequences of the building being impacted are non-survivable for the organization. Then you've got to do something about it. So bias your thoughts around consequence, not around likelihood. The uncertainty around determining likelihood of an interruption is too great. There's too much uncertainty around likelihood. Really, really difficult to do. The other one is, here's a question for you. How many people have life insurance? Who has life insurance? What is the likelihood of you dying before the age of 75 in Canada? That's a good quantification there. Yep, that much. Actually, it's 285.5 per 100,000 people, right? 0.3%. Right? So the likelihood of you dying before the age of 75 in Canada is like, to quote my colleague over there, okay? It is really, really small. But why do we have life insurance? Because of the consequences. The consequences are intolerable for our families, so we have life insurance. Not because of the likelihood. Business continuity management is life insurance for organizations. Right? Bias it towards the consequence, not the likelihood. Right. A couple of very basics. Minimum plan contents. If you're going to have a BCP, a business continuity plan, You need to think about when is it activated, who does what, roles and responsibilities, priorities, what should be done, in what order, okay? Recovery resources, what's available. This is the real big thing with the plan. These stories of, well, when the first contact with the enemy, the plans goes out the window and all that. True to a point. The big thing the plan does, though, you say, this is what can go wrong, this is what we'll do about it if these things do go wrong, and we'll put our plan together that tells us how we're going to use the resources. That tells us what resources we need so we can put those things in place. For me, one of the really important things of a plan is stitching together what we're going to do and what we need to do it. And it helps you put those things in place, justify the need to put those things in place. Then you've got flexibility. If you don't have those resources and you get to that through planning, then you're probably doomed from the start. Plus, if you have a plan, you can practice it and see what works and what doesn't work and so on. And resource replacement, who's responsible for replacing things that are broken? Because business interruptions are typically caused by things that are broken, right? It's not like other operational risks. It's not like we do something badly. Yeah, I mean, you could do change control badly and break your IT system, but the interruption is caused by the broken IT system, right? So it's resources that are compromised or denied or broken that cause the interruption. So you've got to replace things that are broken, really. Communication, incident escalation, internal stakeholder communications, external stakeholder. Most organizations, their senior people have Blackberries or company phones or whatever the case might be, and they have lists and they can use that, contact them, but most of their staff don't, right? And that's private information, right? Private information. So how are you going to communicate with people on a Sunday morning to tell them, how are you going to communicate with your whole organization on a Sunday morning to tell them not to come to work on Monday? Just think about that for a second. It's easy. This stuff is all easy to do, and it's cheap today, right? But you've got to think about it, right? Basic scenarios. So I don't like getting into scenario planning. If you have a fire on the third floor and a flood on the second, and no, right? That you're not going to produce plans. You're going to produce telephone directories. They're going to be kind of like that thick, right? Don't do that. Facility failure, skills shortage, information loss, supply chain failure, specialized equipment loss, inventory loss. Those are the big nuggets. If you cover off those things, what happens if this is broken? What happens if that's broken? You're kind of pretty good to go. Very briefly, that's my concept of operations that I encourage clients to adopt. Incident management plan, emergency management plan, facility emergency response plans, that's safety, evacuation, possibly shelter in place, damage assessment and impact evaluation at the time something goes wrong at a facility, right? So that ties in with, we've evacuated, now what, right? Corporate incident management plan, it's like your emergency operations center. Tactical BCP per building. I don't know what we do. So if you've got an organization that has multiple buildings, they have a tactical BCP per building. That tells you, what's important in that building, how quickly it's got to come back. Then each department operating in those locations will have its own plan or maybe a simple checklist depending on what it needs, how much guidance it needs. But that's kind of it's not one plan. And if you break it up like this, you can give people pieces that they are responsible for. Governance again, right? And you sit at the top and you stitch it all together, right? They want that more quickly and they want that, and let's see how can we allocate the resources, go up to see how they want that. Can we give them that first and that second? Yes, you can. No, you can't, right? It's part of that governance process. If you split it up and allocate the responsibility for maintaining the stuff across the organization, the people who are doing this become more aware, more involved, they buy into it. If they think you're doing it all for them, you've got a problem, right? That's when your executive comes on, I'm going to lead. Here we go. And, yep, don't trust what hasn't been tested or practiced. If you haven't tested it, you haven't practiced it, don't trust it, it's likely not going to work. Awareness, big one is culture. Culture in organizations. If you have a culture, this is risk management. If you have a culture where someone finds a problem and they raise it and they get moaned at for it, they're not going to do it again. They come to you and say, I got a problem here, boss. This is the problem. I don't know what to do about it, or I don't have the authority. Don't say, bring me solutions, not problems. Because if you do that, they won't do it again. So these risks will go unrecognized and unmitigated, right? What they want is, here's the resources to fix it, or, thanks for that, we can't fix it right now because these other things are more important, but we accept the risk. It's not your fault if it goes wrong. Do what you can, but it's not your fault. We absolve you of that, right? Because we can't fix it. This is risk management 101. If you have a culture of fear, you're not going to get anything done because people will hide things. Okay? They will hide things. Got to acknowledge it can happen to us. Culture, the way we do things around here, might not be good enough anymore. You might have to actually change that. Bystander effect, very important. This is, it's seen in they talk about in two areas. One is lots of people in a crowd, something happens, everyone stands back, bystander effect, no one wants to get involved. The other one is a whole bunch of people know there's a train wreck coming, but they don't do anything about it, they don't say anything, because if they open their mouth again, they're going to be fired. Right? I've seen that movie a few times, where someone says, "But this thing's going to break. Either tell me we're going to accept it, or help me fix it. But there's a thing here. I know, they know," and they get shut down. Okay, shut up. You bring that up again, you're fired. Okay, we'll just stand back and watch a train wreck, and it happens. Happened. Both shuttle disasters. It's exactly what happens. A good book called "Why Accidents Are Rarely Accidental." Okay, go and have a read of it. So in summary, project, not a program. It's enterprise-wide. Executive involvement is absolutely critical. You've got to try and prevent it and fix it if it breaks. It's not a one-way thing. There are information that you can get. The BCI, Good Practice Guidelines, encourage you to go and look at it. There's a summary you can download. If you pay a little bit, you can download the whole thing. If you're a member of the organization, you can download it for free. And there's lots of white papers and other publications. Everything from supply chain continuity right through to incident management, crisis communications, all and they're free. All right? Go to thebci.org and have a look. British Columbia at bciforum.net if you want to join the organization. Clive.lunn@accredoconsulting.com. That's me. If you want to talk to me about any of this stuff, feel free to drop me a line. I work for coffee. So if you buy me a cup of coffee, I'll have a chat to you. ISO.org, obviously, for the societal security standards, ISO 22301. Sorry, guys, that was as fast as I could get through it. But I'll be around for a few minutes in the corridor, and I won't speak as loudly if you want to ask me any questions. Thanks.